As a result of activities over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen sort of a changing dynamics in terms of supply chain. Firms are looking for a more balance between scale and reliability. If we look at what happened over the last 10 years, we see a lot of organizations moving manufacturing to China. And the reason for moving manufacturing to China or Asia in general, and soon to be Latin America or Africa, is reduced labor cost. So they're in effect getting more economies of scale. But the trade-off is coming as a result of some experience with the tsunamis and the floods and the congestion is they want reliability. They know that scale and reliability are somewhat trade-offs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So infrastructure congestion is becoming increasingly problematic. The other item is that the increasing energy costs will shift supply chain mode selection and design. So as fuel costs go up, you're going to see companies want to contract their supply chains. And the importance of being able to quantify what is the overall value proposition. If we look at the changing dynamics of supply chain design, and this sort of illustrates the point, people were pushing to get more centralized, in other words, having one production site. Let's say in the case of microchips for cars, they were putting one production site in a centralized operation that happened to be nearer in Japan. And the only restriction on that was how far you could afford to ship products. So that was sort of where the trade-off, where you could say, we can centralize as much as we can afford to ship. If we add in increased fuel cost, you can see it comes back. And the fuel cost that most supply chains were designed on was $1 and $1.50 a gallon of diesel fuel. Now if you've checked, it's about $3.50 a gallon and increasing. There's another factor, which is risk. What many of the companies realized, and it's been talked about in the press, and it was recently last night in the State of the Union press, the cost of risk of congestion, the cost of risk of delays, the cost of risk of having tsunamis and knocking out production of key sites is saying, we're going to back away from this centralization, and we're going to become more decentralized. So we're talking about this issue in an ideal time where companies are looking at it and saying, well, we know we have to have the economy of scale, but we also know the cost of risk resulted with it. So what's the public sector role in terms of supply chain? Number one is supporting cross-border trade, provide educational opportunities to train people in supply chain, both in the operational area, operating facilities in a 21st century environment with a high degree of information technology, and also how to manage them, improve the transportation infrastructure, particularly at key points. One of the key items, as was talked about, but certainly came out in the summit, was ensuring cross-border security. We want to make sure that we have secure borders, but we also want to make sure that the time to get across borders is reasonable. One of the challenges in terms of the supply chain moving product to and from Canada is what time does it take to get through customs. If we look at regions, and I know you can't read this, but cities that are focused on supply chain management: Memphis, Louisville, Kansas City, Chicago, Columbus, and Indianapolis. They've all built on the supply chain management strategy. This is the direction they're going. Probably the most comparative one that we have is Columbus, which has, out on the web, they have a plan, Columbus 2020, in which they characterize they're going to add about 185,000 jobs to the 10 counties around Columbus as a result of supply chain initiatives. And they're much better developed at it than we are in terms of that plan. The Great Lakes region is a hub for a particular supply chain. We're uniquely positioned for the movement of product, as Anne-Marie said, from Canada, Halifax, Montreal, and to the Midwest region. While Chicago is probably more uniquely positioned, they're also extremely more congested. And so we're in a good situation to take stuff from them in terms of that plan. We identified a few industries that we could particularly focus on. So we were saying, what are the best ones we can target at? Heavy manufacturing, something we've been very good at. Light manufacturing, distribution industries, and certainly not to be left off as the agricultural industry, opportunities to improve movement of products there. What we were looking for here is which industries could we approach and say, this is why you should locate here, and make a valid economic argument. And that's where we came up with the opportunity for the jobs just actually in the Southeast Michigan area. Southeast Michigan, Northern Ohio, the opportunity was 66,000 jobs. And I think that was a very conservative number if you add in the Ontario and Halifax area, and then extend it even further to Western Michigan and Northern Michigan. The opportunities are pretty extensive. What are the strengths to have? We have some key strengths to sell. And those are factors that we really haven't promoted very well. What are the gaps that we have? And this is really where the conference came out. We haven't really marketed the area. Nobody has told the story. We have told all the things that are wrong with the region and not really told the story of why we are a good supply chain location. We have done a lot to streamline government. We haven't really developed a streamlined plan in terms of the transportation strategy. That is in process. We haven't leveraged business partnerships, and we haven't got a community involvement. As Anne Marie alluded to when we talked later up here, one of the critical things is telling a coherent, consistent message, and that just really indicates what that one is. What are the obstacles to implementation? The cultural mindset, getting to believe that we can really do this and that we really do have an advantage. And everybody you tell the story to can see the story, but the story is not often told very much. We have some key infrastructure items that need some funding. One of the reasons I got into this at the beginning is I didn't want to see funding going to multiple duplicative infrastructure items. And so I said, we got to figure out which ones are really critical in the process. Regional collaboration is a critical one, and that's, again, what brought us all together is we said we needed to do this. And we need to tell the story not for Detroit or not for Toledo or not for Flint or Lansing or Windsor, but this region, upper Midwest region, whatever we call it. And that's why we came up with the Great Lakes International Trade and Transportation Hub. We're the first ones to admit that may not be the best name, but it really represents what we have to offer. And we need to tell a story that says this is really a good place and here's why. So the bottom line is as we looked at the opportunity, there is significant opportunity. And I said the 66,000 is what we quantified. In fact, if we could redo the analysis, that this was sponsored by the New Economy Initiative, redoing it today would be, I think, a much larger number. If we don't do anything, other regions will certainly take advantage of it. Columbus and Indianapolis are clearly positioned they're telling the same story. They don't have the assets we've got to promote, but they're further ahead in terms of telling the story. One of the challenges we have, which I think what represents what we got out of the Halifax conference and the Glyph conference, is this is multi-state, multi-nation collaboration. Not a lot of record of it, but we can both benefit substantially from it, and that's really the story in terms of putting it into place. Thank you very much.